This is the Average Guy Network, and you have found Home Gadget Geeks, show number 495, recorded on July 1st, 2021. Here on Home Gadget Geeks, we cover all the favorite tech gadgets that find their way into your home. News, reviews, product updates, and conversation, all for the average tech guy. I'm your host, Jim Collison, broadcasting live from the Average Guy TV studios here in beautiful Bellevue, Nebraska. And of course, we post the show, and not a bunch tonight, but some world-class show notes out at the Average Guy .tv. Big thanks to Christian Johnson, who joined us 2 weeks ago. Got a chance to catch up with him and everything that's going on over there at Maple Grove Partners. If you haven't checked it out yet, I know it's busy time for a lot of folks, but if you haven't checked it out yet, go out to theaverageguy.tv/HGG494. You can catch up with Christian and all that's going on. We have a busy night tonight. Mike will join us here shortly, but I've got Jon Panozzo with us from Unraid and Lime Technologies. Jon, welcome back. We've been waiting a while to get you. Welcome back to Home Gadget Geeks.
Thanks, Jim. I appreciate it. It's good to be back.
I know it's been a little slow over there on the Unraid side. Give us a quick overview. We were actually, last time we had you on, we were waiting for 6.9 to kind of come out, and it did. And then I pinged you and you were like, oh, I'll get back to you.
Yeah.
And we finally got it pulled together, but give us a little summary of how things been going since the last time we saw you.
Things have been going really well. So obviously 6.9, really good release for us. Multiple pull support, huge feature. Really glad that we were able to get that out to people. I think we're just kind of setting the stage with it with other things that are to come. And we've been working really hard on version 6.10, which we're hoping to have out to folks pretty soon. 6.10 is going to be all about security over convenience. That's the main theme of that release. We're making a lot of changes to the default behavior of the operating system. I mean, you wouldn't have to look hard to find a number of pretty big security issues related to storage appliances in the last few months. You know, cough, cough, Western Digital, cough, cough, QNAP, list goes on. And, we started taking a much harder look at how we were doing things in our operating system. And we're not really we weren't subject to the same vulnerabilities that those two were in those examples. But there were some other things that maybe our default values, which we used to be much more about like, hey, let's just make this super easy to get it so that you have a NAS with shares that you can write to over the network, to, hey, let's really make the user think a little bit more critically about security. So, one of the best examples of this is something as simple as the root password. So, when we started Unraid, before I was even part of the company, the modern router or switch at that point in time didn't have a default password. You just got it, you logged into it, and then you'd set one if you wanted, but you could leave it with no password. Now that behavior's changed, right? All the router manufacturers kind of did realize, it's probably a good idea to just put something on the back of the box that the user has to see. And so we decided, that's probably something that we should be doing too. So everybody in 6.10 is going to be forced to set a root password to the system because, root means a lot more than just the web GUI. So if somebody was able to get into the system because they didn't have a root password set and was able to actually hit it at the console layer, like through SSH or something, you could do a lot of damage. So having a root password, I think, is going to be huge. But that's just one of a number of things that we're changing.
Jon, that's a pretty big change when you just kind of think about how long this has been around. And and while it makes sense to me, are you like, what will you do to kind of work with the existing user base? Because there are some setups out there that don't have it. You're going to get some pushback from some folks. So what are you guys thinking about just in that area? How do you kind of approach the community to kind of get that communicated?
Yeah, so we've actually been talking with the community on this subject, like not publicly, but because it's kind of a sensitive subject when we're talking security. There's a lot of different facets to it, but we have a number of different community members that are also developers that have contributed to Unraid, and so these discussions weren't just done behind closed doors. We've been talking to them as well, and everybody seemed to be in agreement that there's going to be a little hooting and hollering probably here and there, but I think that if we just point to a couple of those examples of how much real damage can happen just because you didn't secure it. I think that's going to be eye-opening to folks, and I don't think there's going to be as much pushback as there might be a little initially, but I think it'll be quickly abated. And in addition to that, I think it's not just even about root security; it's about share security. So we're even going to have default behaviors there are going to change as well. Now, one thing that's worth mentioning, you mentioned existing users. We will not proactively change anybody's existing settings on their shares. So from a security perspective, if you already have shares configured that are public, when you upgrade to 610, we're not going to automatically set them to private or take them off of being exported via SMB. But now when you create a new share on version 6.10, SMB export will not be by default, and the setting will be set to private, not public by default. So you will have to explicitly tell me, hey, I want this share to be public, or hey, I want this share to be exported over SMB. So that's just a behavioral change so that folks understand that by default, whatever they're creating is going to be locked down. And then if they want to choose to change that permission level, they're the ones making that choice. Because you and I both know most people, they're just click next, right, and get to the end as quick as they can. And they don't always understand the implications of that. So just by changing this behavior, it's going to educate people that they have to understand what they're doing.
Can you, from that perspective, because you have a lot of super users in there as well.
Oh, yeah.
So does that affect their setup in what they're doing, or are they going to be, are the super users going to be fine?
I don't think the super users. Yeah, I think the super users are already setting a strong root password. I think most of them are probably already using private level security on their shares. So I'm not as concerned about them. And even if they're not using those settings, to convert them to use those settings, if they're a power user, they'll figure it out really quickly. It's the more casual users that aren't maybe in the IT industry, but they use an Unraid server, or folks that just aren't as familiar with how share security and Samba, things like that work.
Yeah.
They're going to have to maybe go on the forums here and there. Hey, I created a share and it's not showing up. What do I do? And it'll be a quick fix. And there'll be some documentation probably in the wiki as well to highlight these things, as well as, of course, in the release notes. But there's only so much text you can put out there proactively, right? And at the end of the day, how many people are going to actively look at it? So, thankfully, we have a really good forum community. And so when people run into common problems like that, they post it, they get it resolved pretty quickly.
Joe says in the chat room, it's worth noting that Microsoft is also disabling guest public shares, right? I mean, I think that's kind of the new era that we're in. John, folks, Joe says I have a hardware upgrade for my Unraid boxes. I've just been too lazy to get out of the rack. What if I'm at 6.8 and maybe I haven't upgraded yet and I'm going to 6.9? Can you give us the quick, what's the elevator pitch that you would give to get on the 6.9 upgrade, and kind of what is that? What kind of features or what are the important features that it's bringing?
I think the number one most important feature in 6.9 by far and away is multiple pool support. I mean, multiple pools really opens the door to a lot of different configurations that you can set up on your system. So, you have to understand. So going back to the early days of Unraid, we had just the array. That was it. There was no cache. There was no idea of a cache pool. There was just the array, and there was only single parity, and that's all there was. And generally speaking, in that configuration, there's a couple ways that you can go about setting up the disks to work that will yield different performance results. And the main way that people would use it was where we would only spin up the disks that were actually being written to. So if you were doing a write to a share, typically you'd only be writing one file at a time, and you would see the disk that you were writing to spin up and the parity disk spin up, and that was it. And that would give you the best power consumption, best longevity out of your disks, but the sacrifice there would be a little bit of performance. And so you'd see anywhere from 30 to 60 megabyte a second, depending on what era, what decade we were talking about, and what type of devices we were talking about. But that was kind of the high end of what you would see. And so some people were saying, well, I have a 1 gigabit network and I want to go a little bit faster. I want to saturate that link. So how do I do that? Well, at the time, before cache, there was only one other method, and that was to turn on a setting under disk settings called reconstruct write, and that would spin all the disks up for any write operation. And you can still do that today, by the way. If anybody out there wants to immediately boost the performance of writes directly to the array, bypassing the cache, you can still go in disk settings, and it's a MD write method, and the tunable there you want to set is reconstruct write, and that'll make all the disks spin for any write operation, which means that there's one less IO path that has to happen, or one IO thread that has to happen per write operation. And so that substantially improves the performance. And generally speaking, when you do that, you're going to get pretty much the write speed of the slowest drive in the array. So, and most HDDs are already going over 100 megs a second, 100 megabytes per second. So you're going to saturate a 1 gigabit link. Fine. but then you're obviously spinning all your disks up, adding more wear and tear. So we added the cache, and the cache was a way to offload. And then people said, okay, well, the cache is great, but now it's subject to disk loss or data failure, right? So if a device fails, if the cache fails, there is no redundancy for the cache. So that's not a great solution. It's a temporary one, but it's not a great solution. So then we added the idea of having a cache pool where you could have multiple devices in a pool. And so your cache would be both high performance and redundant. You get the best of both worlds there, which is awesome. And then we added VMs and Docker support, right? And when those things were combined, we started to see some users complain about write contention, right? So what would happen is if you had a busy network environment where storage was constantly being written to over the network, and you had a cache-enabled share that was happening to, and you had virtual machines that were living on that cache, and you had Docker containers that, as applications were running, were writing to the cache, you have these 3 different sets of needs all hitting the same cache pool at the same time. And so with HDDs, that could be really bad. Even with SSDs, that could be not the greatest because it can cause performance issues either from within the VM for any Docker container or just your writes across the network. And so there was no real solution to that problem. So with 6.9, by adding multiple pools, users are literally able to now segment their needs into different pools, and not just between applications, but even between shares. So if I say, all right, I want to have a cache pool and I want to dedicate that just for my virtual machines, fine, create one for that need. Separately, maybe I want a cache pool just for my Docker containers, just for my applications that are running on the server. Okay, fine, create one just for that. And maybe I want another cache pool that's going to front end write operations to the array and act as a proper cache, right? So I can have one for that. And then maybe I want yet another one that's for a specific share, where maybe I have a bunch of other like video editors, let's say, like Linus from Linus Tech Tips might do this, where he'd have a pool set up just for his video editors to work on, so that's segmented from all the other stuff that's happening. So it's a way to segment your needs for I/O across different pools. So I think that's huge.
Yeah, no, that sounds interesting from the standpoint, and a little more complex, right? For folks to kind of figure out, okay, I got these drives, going to assign them to this pool, and then they're going to have a specific use. We may have, I imagine, in some heavy use scenarios, you want to get those on maybe spinning disks, just to make sure you're not wearing out your SSDs from that perspective. So, no, super cool from that perspective. Yeah. As you think about looking ahead to 6.10, what are a couple features, if you were, kind of thinking like, oh, we're really, you mentioned one already, but what are you looking forward to, and or what's the important parts of 6.10?
So there's a lot of stuff that I need to kind of leave under wraps.
Sure,
I can't give away all the goodies.
No worries. Whatever we can talk about.
Yeah, so like I said, security is the big one. That's the big thing that's changing. There's a number of other areas in which security is changing that are not so much user facing, but more of adding better protections into how certain operations happen within the system, so that bad actors can't take advantage. And then in addition to that, there's a number of under the hood updates that we're doing to how do I want to say this without giving everything away? To libvirt and QEMU, we'll leave it at that. So things related to virtualization that certain folks have been asking for, and there's just a ton of under the hood fixes. So we're going to have a public release here hopefully pretty soon, and we'll have a set of release notes attached to it that give you the full goodies and the full breakdown. But I'd say that the biggest stuff that people are going to be seeing in this release are 2 things. One is all the security changes. The other is actually going to be my servers integration. So if you remember from the last time we talked about this, we were talking a little bit about the soon.unraid.net domain and what that was all about. And so that's obviously since been released. And basically what that was it was an early access program for folks to both join our Discord server, which is now public. So I encourage folks out there to join our Discord server.
Where would they? How would they join that, John? What's the best way to do that?
So it's actually through our forum. Okay. So you can actually sign in to our forums, and then you can link your forum account to our Discord server. And what that does is it preserves your username. It preserves your identity on the Discord server. So if you already are a Unraid forum member and you're participating in our community, nobody's going to be able to impersonate you on our Discord server. So, but that's how you actually get into it as well.
What's the quick address for the forums if folks wanted to go out there?
Forums.unraid.net.
Okay, perfect.
So pretty easy to remember that one.
Yeah, no, right on. I just want to make sure we get that in there.
Yeah. So, but yeah, a lot of security centric stuff happening in 6.10, and moving forward with 6.11, we've got a lot of fun stuff in store. We're hopefully going to tackle ZFS. That's my big wish. So
Okay.
we started our own podcast since the last time I was on.
What's the name? What's the name of
it?
it?
It's called the Uncast.
Okay.
So everything's we're always like 7-Up is going to come after me and say, look, that marketing, we're taking it back. So, but
I think you're okay.
we're going to beat that into the ground. Okay. Everything is going to be And so we started the Uncast, and I'm 5 episodes in as of tomorrow.
Oh, good.
And so tomorrow's episode is a lot about 6.10, a lot more about the security features that are changing, as well as a topic that I love to talk about, which is high performance use cases for Unraid, and specifically 10 gigabit networking. So I've been doing a ton of experimenting lately with 10 gigs. So have the rest of the team here.
Oh, wow.
And it's been a fun experiment because, traditionally we never really thought of 10 gig as something we even would really have to worry about because, not okay. You're kind of an old IT guy, right? So you remember back in the day, 10 gig was super expensive.
Right.
I mean, you never even would think about putting it in your home.
Right.
But now you got, these Ubiquity 10 gig switches that are 550. We got one of those XG16s here, and it's pretty sharp. It's pretty nifty. It took me a while to figure out how to get it set up actually, but once I did it's pretty nifty. And it's got 4 10 gig ports that are Ethernet based, and then I think 16 SFP plus ports on it, and it was 550. I'm like, that's not really that bad.
No.
And now you can get 10 gig NICs for under $100, so that's huge. So we're starting to see some more people experimenting with 10 gig on Unraid, and this is where you do see some performance limitations between either using HDDs or things that are going through the cache pool. Even there's just some performance limitations based on how Samba works, and based on how our network stack is tuned, and based on the fact that we use Butterfest RAID 1, not a RAID 0. So there's some areas that we needed to play around with to see, what would happen if those barriers were lifted from, say, maybe a new type of file system being added. We'll just say maybe there's something like that. So there would be a reason to have the capability to do 10 gigabit transfers. And we were banging our head against the wall, but we started playing around with SMB multi-channel. And I got to say, you'll find out some more on the podcast tomorrow. But we blew the doors off this thing. It was great. We saw bidirectional 10 gig performance. So really, really excited at what that means for the potential of Unraid in the future.
How long before 10 gig you think is fairly? I mean, it's out there, but as we think about mainstream and lots of folks using it, how long do you think before we see that?
So I think that it'll come in phases. So the first, maybe not the first, but one of the things that I could easily see people doing is as they upgrade their hardware. So at some point, in your life cycle of owning an Unraid server, you're going to add storage, you're going to replace storage, but eventually you're just going to be like, I'm building a new one. I'm going to do a data migration, and I'll take the old one and I'll either repurpose it, or maybe I'll make it my backup server. That's what a lot of people do. And so what I could easily see folks doing is saying, you know what, I'm not even going to buy a 10 gig switch. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go buy 2 10 gig NICs. And I'm going to just plug them direct into one another.
There you go.
And just create a private network between the 2 Unraid servers. And that way, when I need to do my backup jobs, I can go at full 10 gig speed. So that's a low cost way for someone to begin adopting 10 gig. Because you got to remember, you can still do that over standard Ethernet.
Right.
So now your real out-of-pocket cost is the 2 NICs, and those are, I think they're Quantia. I don't know how to pronounce the name, but the ones from Asus, I think they are. Okay. They're like $97 on Newegg.
That's pretty reasonable.
So it's pretty reasonable for us. I mean, you're in a single port, but do you really need dual 10 gig? I mean, if you do, I want to be your friend, but
this is my audience we're talking about. So
that's true. I guarantee there's probably somebody out there that bought one of those Cisco Unified Fabric 160 gigabit throughput NICs, and they're like, I got this in my basement. And I'm like, oh, you jerk. just making us all cry.
Oh, that's super good. I put the link to the podcast, unraid.net/blog/podcast, if you want to head out and get that. Give me a little hint on the format. Like if I was going to go out and listen to the podcast, what would I expect? What's your format? How long is it? That kind of stuff.
So I haven't adopted video yet. That's the one thing that I'll say. So it's audio only.
Probably
for right
better
now.
that way. We're just talking heads, John. Right?
Yeah, I know, and that's kind of what I was saying. But I'm getting pressure from some people to be like, "Hey, man, can you add some video? It'd be kind of cool to actually see your guests." And eventually, I want to see if I can get Linus from Linus Tech Tips on. Yeah, that'd be good to have video. So I think we're going to do that eventually.
Good.
But it's audio only for right now. But we cover a lot of different topics. So some of the episodes are just me. And it's just me ranting. No, it's just me talking about different subjects related. Like the first one's all about owning your own home server, kind of the do's and don'ts of why you should want one. And then we have a couple other episodes where we have some guests. Recently, I had on Bill Clayman, which is actually a personal friend of mine, and he works for Switch, the big data center company. And before that, we actually had on Paulus Scoutson. He always tells me, you got to pronounce my last name like there's a G after the S. And it's hard for me to do Scoutson. And he is the founder of Home Assistant. And so we had him and Doug Robertson from AlterCo Robotics, the guys that make Shelly, the IoT devices. We had them. That was a great one. I highly encourage your audience to check that one out. That was super fun. So we have a variety of different topics that we cover. So it's not a consistent format. Sometimes we're going to cover, different news events that are relevant. Sometimes we're going to talk, deep dive into Unraid subjects like episode 2, where I went all in on VMs and GPU pass through. So we kind of it's kind of a revolving door of subjects. And then this one that's coming out tomorrow is all about version 6.10 and the 10 gigabit testing that I've been doing.
Well, Home Assistant has made, Wieger loves, and by the way, Wieger's MIA tonight. I'll have to. He was like, "Hey, I can't get in on the link," and I'm like, "What do you mean you can't get in on the link?" I think he's been drinking.
That's all right.
Mike kind of brought, or maybe it was you. Maybe it was you the last time you were on here. I think you said something about Home Assistant, and that I think lit a fire for us that we have not gotten off of, and we still talk about it quite a bit. We haven't talked about it in the last couple weeks or last couple months, but we both spent a lot of time. We've got Home Assistant running. Mike's had it running in about 8,000 different configurations on his Unraid box, and we've been messing around with that. I'm kind of a set it and just use it kind of guy with it, and have created, with Home Assistant, I've created, Ring dashboards, and I have an all switches dashboard that's just it's just a page of all the switches. I can just go right to it and do those pieces there. So we've gotten into so cool. I have to go back. That's one. That's episode 3 dated June 4th. There again, unraid.net /blog/podcast. You can get out to the Uncast or the the
Uncast. You got it.
Uncast. Okay.
Yeah, Uncast.
Uncast, and I love that.
It's also on YouTube, so you can check us out on YouTube as well.
Uncast channel, or is it
it's the channel.
It's a channel.
It's a channel. It's its own channel. There's like I said, we try to keep it in tandem as well, and we're on all the major podcast platforms. So Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google, like you name it. It's everything that Buzzsprout supports. We're on. So it's super. Yeah.
Well, good to see you guys. I know you were thinking about that the last time we had you on, and good to see you guys doing your own. From a company perspective, things. I assume everybody made it through the pandemic okay, business wise and health wise. We're hoping for as well. Anything you're looking for new or any kind of thing? Anything open there?
For sure. So we are expanding. We are looking for a senior Node.js developer right now. We actually have a post on our blog about that. So if you're interested in applying, I think we actually just extended the deadline on applications another couple of weeks. So I would highly encourage if you have good Node.js experience and are interested in joining a team with lots of flexible work hours and lots of really good benefits, I would highly encourage you apply because we are looking for somebody.
What's I assume that's just go out to look at careers out there on the Unraid site, and they should be able to find that.
It's actually a blog post, so we don't actually have a careers page on our site yet, but we do have a blog post about the job position. So if you go to our blog, I think it's like the second most recent blog post that was up there.
Remote capabilities, I'm assuming.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No on-site required. It's super flexible. It's starting as a contract position. But potential for full-time position. But super flexible, pretty easy to work with team, people that are professionals, but fun to talk to. So
yeah. So about how big's the organization now? What do you have as you think about resources available?
We have over 10 total people working on the project at this point. It's a combination of full-time staff and part-time contractors. And it's a great team. We have a really great team of people. Like they're very dedicated to grinding at the code and making things better, double checking security. We even brought in multiple people from our community. So most recently we hired Larry Meany, who is heading up our My Servers development, and he's known as LJM42 on our forums, and he's been a forum member for years. Former Cisco employee, so very talented developer. So yeah, I mean, we're very excited about our potential as a business because we do have such a dedicated and loyal community. And not only do we have a dedicated and loyal community, they're full of professionals. They're full of people like you, like me, that are, super into IT, or they're developers. And I mean, even Alexis, one of our other developers from Australia, she's, started as a forum user, started as a user of Unraid, and then wanted something in Unraid, wanted an API, and started talking with our development guys, and they were like, hey, if you want to come on board and start helping us build stuff like that, yeah, we're all game. And just one thing led to another. So it's really great when you have a community of talented people that you can tap into to continue your growth as a business. So that's one of the biggest things that I think about our company
that's
right
cool.
now.
That's cool. Good. Exciting. So if you're interested in that, head out to the site, head out to unraid.net and find that blog post and get applied. It'd be great to see somebody maybe from our community make it into a role like that.
Absolutely.
John, a couple of years ago, I started doing some hard drive cryptocurrency mining / farming.
Nice.
Were you
using Chia, or what were you using?
Well, we originally we started on Burst way back in the day and did some Burst mining, and then Chia has picked up. I'm glad you mentioned it. Chia, that's a project I picked up middle to late last year. It was kind of my pandemic project that I worked on. Burst didn't do this, but Chia has kind of driven up the price of hard drives and SSDs. I was gonna say, do you guys sense that? I mean, you're in a space. Yes, you're doing the software for it, but you're talking to so many people. Have you gotten any negative feedback? Like, I can't find an SSD anywhere to put in my Unraid box because they're all getting picked up. Have you?
I haven't seen that yet. Like, I haven't seen anybody saying that yet. I'm sure there are. But no, not so much. The funny thing about Chia is that I know very little about Chia, but it's funny that you were mentioning, crypto mining off of storage, because when I had Bill Clayman on, that was one of the things that he had talked to me actually about pre-show. He's like, hey, have you checked out this Chia stuff yet? Does that work on Unraid? I'm like, well, let me look. And then looked on the App Store, and sure enough, there was a Chia Docker container out there. So I'm like, well, clearly somebody thought it was a good idea. And he's like, well, yeah, you got to check this out. This is so cool. I have so much unused space on my server, and now I can, do some Chia mining off of it. And I'm like, all right. I still think about the little pets that grow plant grows on top of, but all right.
It gets a lot.
So do you have a Chia mining operation going now?
Well, we call it farming. So that's that little. They're trying to, they're making this big plan of being green. Yeah, they're trying to be green about this, right? So they're calling it farming. And I purchased a few hard drives just to kind of round out, when my Marine son came home, he bought a cat, and that cat pulled one of my server boxes off the shelf.
Oh no.
And 3 drives instantly dead, right? So that was pretty good. He felt really bad.
I bet.
He felt bad for that.
Cat?
No, the cat didn't. The cat didn't care. Yeah, just didn't give a shit. But but he was super like, Dad, I'm so sorry. I'm like, don't worry about it. It's just drives. And it actually got me to kind of reconfigure. I reconfigured my Unraid box and actually put some bigger drives in it because I wanted to use it as a storage location. One of the great things about Chia is it doesn't necessarily require a ton of power. It just needs to be able to get to the drives relatively quickly. And of course, Unraid can do that fine. And so I put some of those plots. That's what you generate these plots. Put some of that on the Unraid server. I've got a device. I've got a Drobo device. I put some on, and then I built a big kind of Windows server that's got the big, it's got most of it in there. And so we're doing some mine on it. It's great on Unraid. It's great. It's it does what it needs to do. It does it fast enough. It's an SMB share. Just goes out to the network. It can read those, and I could scale that out if I wanted to. We could put a lot of files on there, and it works great. That's kind
amazing.
It's they don't recommend, in this space, they don't recommend RAID because you want to get the maximum number of files per hard drive.
Right.
And in some cases I've actually just gone against that because I'm like, well, if I do lose a drive and I've got it rated, I can rebuild that quickly and I don't have to replot. So there's some back and forth, going on.
Yeah, that's an interesting kind of thought process that they're saying you wouldn't want to use some kind of parity protection.
Well, they say you can just replot them faster than in some cases maybe than spending the time rebuilding. Now that may be different if you're talking about larger drives, right?
Sure.
Rebuilding or replotting to an 8 terabyte drive or something like that might be. I've kind of kept the drives for this project, kind of kept them small. So just in case something happens, like 4 terabyte drives were in the sweet spot when I was doing this at like $50. And so
how does it work? Do you just fill them up and then sell them?
No. So you fill them up and then you have a software application. You have a miner
like a
or a farmer. It's presented to the blockchain and then everybody submits their solutions and one wins, right? That's basically how crypto mining works, right? There's a problem that's put forth by the blockchain and everybody tries to solve it. This is oversimplified, by the way, but pretty close. And so you have these pre-plotted, you create these plots basically on GPU mining, right? That's all done in real time. Solution, solve it. Solution, solve it. Right. With hard drive, it's like solution, and then it looks on the hard drive for the solution. And if it's there, you win it. So, a hard drive runs at what, 5 watts, maybe?
Yeah, it's super low power.
3, 4, 5. GPU runs at like what, 500 watts?
Yeah. enough to make enough as a space heater. Okay, let's leave it at that.
Right on. So the Unraid box has been great for that. The great thing is because they're just S&P shares, I can have them out there and still be running the box for all kinds of other things, and it doesn't take very much power on the. I don't run any Dockers. I don't run the software in a Docker or anything like that. I've got that running on a Windows box, but works out pretty well. I just wondered if like maybe you had got like, cause the hard drive community, everybody was complaining like, I can't find a 10 terabyte drive anywhere type thing,
Wow. You know what? Because it's been a while since I've had to order any additional storage devices. Maybe I've just missed the timing on that, because the last time I ordered them, I didn't have a problem.
But it would have been a little bit early in the year. Like it's really started kind of taking off.
What about SSDs? Is that affecting? I would guess maybe not as
very much so, because the plotting process
goes faster.
It's much faster on an SSD. Now you just trash the SSD in the process.
Sure.
Like, you just destroy it. So
have you done the economics on it? Does it make like financial sense? Like you'll get enough burn? Like will you get a return?
Yeah, you can.
I mean, then it's worth it then, right? I mean,
it's can. We were in early, and so being in early. In fact, there's a guy listening who's helping me out with it. Getting in early was a little more profitable than trying to get in right now. The network itself, like I think you may be surprised. The total space right now is at 29 exabytes. So 29 exabytes of plot files are competing for these solutions. It's a lot of storage, and I would imagine quite a bit on. Some of this is on Unraid. Right?
Oh, I'm sure. Because you dedicate entire discs. Is that how you have to do it? You have to dedicate the entire disk, or can you dedicate just a partition? Or
you can dedicate anything you want to it. It doesn't care. It just wants the.
Guarantee you that whoever's got excess storage sitting on their box and it's just idling there.
Yeah. Why not? Why wouldn't you? Right. And that was that was kind of the idea behind the whole project, was if you got extra space, simply plot these and run it. And if you need the space back, just delete the plots.
Yeah.
It's not.
I never personally got into crypto. I just never did the mining thing. And I think it's because I always thought that by the time I'd figure it out, it'd be at that point where the
it's not profitable.
It's not that profitable anymore. So I'm just like, I'm not that smart to figure it out quick enough to make money off of it. Like I've seen people with these crazy farm setups where they're pouring liquid nitrogen on top of the graphics cards to get just that little bit more performance out of it. I'm like, I'm not doing that. I'm not touching that. So I think with the Chia stuff, I just was too late. But like I said, Bill brought it up to me and he's like, this is great. He's like, this is an awesome way to utilize capacity that's on your system that you're just not using.
Well, John, that's the key though. Like it's not, if you already have storage, if you already have data, I mean, if you already got drives, if you got the infrastructure set up, if you're not buying anything, it's never too late. Like, because
I guess that's true. I guess that's true. It's already there and it's not like it's high power consumption. So
no,
I guess I should get into it then. Is that what you're telling me?
I think you should look into it. Yeah. I think you should. I think just from a storage and what's going on around crypto in this space, it's kind of the second generation. Burst was like, there's a bunch of companies, Burst and storage, and who were kind of first gen, and then they learned a bunch of things, and now there's Chia, and there's going to be a ton of Chia copycats, by the way. So because it's been fairly successful, But I think from a storage perspective, it's worth looking into.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask you one more question before I got to let you go because we're out of
Sure.
time. But as we think about those popular applications, this reminded me of that question when you said, "Yeah, I went and looked in the space to see if Chia was in there." What's As we think about applications, what are the hot applications on Unraid right now? Do you get any sense for what's being used the most as we think about the applications that are out there?
Well, I mean, Plex, I think, is number one. I think that's one of the most common ones because it's one of the ones that's just stupid simple to set up and it offers too many benefits. The ability to sync to mobile, the ability to play from anywhere. It's kind of a universal client. And from a feature perspective, I mean, those guys, they're trying to compete with Netflix. They're trying to offer similar. Like I remember when Netflix added the skip intros feature. And I'm like, well, shit, Plex is never going to have this. And then the next week, there's a skip intros button on Plex. I'm like, man, these guys they're paying attention. They know what they're doing. And that's awesome. So I think that's by far probably number one, even though I know that for the super users out there, a lot of people like MB. I've personally, it's been a long time since I looked at MB. Last time I did, it seemed a little confusing to me, but again, I'm the dumb user. I want it to be stupid simple. I want it to be like, I can hand it to, buddies that are not IT professionals and they'll figure it out in a minute. So, but I know MB, there's a lot of people that like MB. My neighbor that just moved next door to me ended up being an Unraid customer already. And he uses MB and I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. And then I think, Home Assistant is a really big one. Paulus is actually the author of the Docker container that is on Unraid.
Oh, wow.
So if you're loading Home Assistant using Docker on Unraid, you can trust the fact that the person who's maintaining that Docker container in the App Store is the creator of the app themselves. That's not always the case. And so I think home automation is a very logical tie into Unraid because you need some kind of central control platform to do that from. And Unraid gives you two ways to do it. There's within the Docker container itself. And then another method is that he actually has a virtual machine template that you can download.
That's the way I run it.
That's how I'm doing it because he told me to. He was like, the Docker container is kind of like the light way so that you can try it out. But if you really want the most featured version of it, then you got to get the VM template. And so that's what I want to actually build that in. So we have where you can download OpenELEC as a pre-built virtual machine within Unraid. So or LibreELEC. And so you just go to the VMs tab, you click LibreELEC, and you hit download, and it downloads the image. I want to do that for Home Assistant. I think that would be a nice feature add so that people don't have to manually specify it. And then I can even add his little icon in there to make it all official. And I think that'd be really cool to do. So I want to do that. I think that, well, the number one plugin that people install is community applications. Clearly,
sure.
That's a no-brainer.
And by the way, that's rock solid. I've never that's been one that's just it just doesn't ever go wrong.
Well, pretty soon you won't be able to install it anymore.
Why not?
Because we're going to build it into the platform.
There you go. Well, that's good.
So we're working real close with Squid on that, and he's been the developer of that plugin, and we do want to get it incorporated at some point because it makes sense. It's such a powerful thing to be able to add all sorts of different applications and whatnot on the fly. So it's exciting. And then honestly, there's so what shocks me isn't necessarily what the most popular applications are. It's the sheer number. It's the sheer number. Because I remember going back to the Unraid 5 days. And there was I could count on two hands how many different plugins existed. That was it because they all had to be custom written for Slackware and they all had to be written for Unraid. So there was no Docker, there was no VM platform. And then we had Docker and this community just exploded around us. And I think we're in the thousands now of various applications that you can add.
That's super great. Yeah, that is super great. Jon, thanks for coming. Anything we need to say to pay the bills for the marketing guys there at Unraid? Anything we missed? We got the job post in, but anything else that
just make sure you check out the podcast. Come check out the Uncast. Come see us. Tomorrow's episode 5. I hope you guys tune in.
Launch tomorrow.
If you or someone you know is a Node.js developer, please apply. We're looking to add some people to the My Servers team, and we could use some really talented people for that. So definitely hope to see some more applications come in as a result of that. And keep your eyes out for version 6.10, the first public release, hopefully coming out very soon. Excited to see some feedback on that. And stay tuned for a lot more good stuff from us. We've got a lot of stuff planned for this year yet.
Sweet. Hey, Jon, ping me when you get some time on your calendar where we can just talk tech. like we can talk gadgets with you, because I know
Yeah,
you're a
for sure.
gadget guy as well. So as some things open up, and everything's crazy busy right now, but as some things open up, ping me. We do this on Thursday nights. Just ping me and we'll get you in a slot and we'll have you back.
For sure.
Talk about
Likewise,
some
I got to have
gadgets.
you and Mike on the
Yeah,
Uncast.
be a
So we
fun,
got to
just
do
from
that
a
soon.
user. Yeah, let's get all the important ones on first, and then you can have us on and we can goof around.
Sounds fun, man.
Thanks, John. Appreciate you
All
coming
right.
on
Take it
tonight.
easy, Jim.
All right, you
Good
bet.
seeing you,
Take
brother.
care. You bet.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. A couple reminders just for you. Big thanks to Jon for coming on, Panozzo for being with us tonight. Appreciate you guys coming out. I struggled to get Mike on all night. It just never really worked out. He was supposed to work it out, and he was having trouble with the link, and so I don't know what's going on over there. But we miss you, Mike, from that perspective. Thanks for giving me 2 weeks off. Well, it wasn't really 2 weeks, but I got a week off last week. It was fun. I had a friend in town, and it was nice to get a Thursday off, as well as not having to worry about an episode out on Saturday. By the way, I'm getting a pretty regular schedule with this. So if you're listening to this on the podcast channel, it's out most Saturdays by usually like noon or 1 p.m. So if you're ever wondering when do I put this out, many of you are a couple weeks behind. But if you're wondering when do I put this out, that might be a good indication. Generally Saturdays. I do Ask the Podcast Coach with Dave Jackson at 9:30 Central. That goes 9:30 to 11. I start watching Cigar Authority at 11 with Ed Sullivan on that, and then I do the podcast, or I edit the podcast while we're doing that. So just in case you're always wondering, when does that thing come out? Yeah, around 1 p.m. Central Saturdays, usually when we have a live show. A couple reminders before we go. One, if you got any questions you want to throw in the chat room that I can answer here, maybe in a post show, throw those questions in there, and we'll do that kind of post show work. If you want to join us in the Discord group, you can do that, theaverageguy.tv/Discord. Don't forget to leave us a message. We'd love to get some messages. Oh, speaking of that, by the way, Rich Hay, if you know Rich Hay from Windows Observer, or the old Windows Observer, Rich Hay will be here next week, and we're going to talk Windows 11. So that's pretty cool. He'll be here to lots of things. I think by then the beta versions of it may be out through the insider preview. So we'll talk a little bit about Windows 11. If you want to jump in on that, that'll be next week with Rich Hay. If you want to leave us a message or leave a message for Rich, you can send us a voicemail. Just go to homegadgetgeeks.com, bottom right-hand corner, leave a voicemail for us, and we'd love to hear from you in that way. If you want to send me an email, I'm Jim at theaverageguy.tv. I've been doing a little more Twitter lately, and I've been doing a little more work Twitter. So if you follow me on Twitter and you're like, what's all this strength stuff? Well, that's my job. That's what I do, and I've been doing more of that on Twitter. We still post some tech stuff, and I'd love to have you guys throw some stuff at me on Twitter. So at Jay Collison, if you want to do that, if you want to jump in. Twitter kind of comes and goes. It's kind of a weird platform. It's there for a while, and then it's not, and then it's there, and then it's kind of not. So if you want to follow me on Twitter, appreciate that as well. Don't forget the AverageGuy.tv platform, powered by Maple Grove Partners. You saw Christian 2 weeks ago, and things are great over there at Maple Grove Partners. If you're looking for some high-speed, secure, reliable hosting that you can trust, that's Christian, and what he's doing over there at Maple Grove Partners. Get secure, reliable, high-speed hosting. MapleGrovePartners.com. Love to have you over there to do that. We'll I'll stick around for a little short show today. Hopefully, I know, just coming back from the break. 45 minutes, dude. Are you serious? Well, okay, sorry. Actually, it'll probably be 40 by the time I edit it, but we'll be back next week. Rich Hay, I'll track down Wieger to see where he went, see if we can get him back. Joe, thanks for sending the beer. We got Joe sent us some more beer. We'll be probably taking a crack at that in the next week or two. I'll stay around for some post show. If you're out there in the chat room and you want to throw some questions at me or just chat that way, we can do it as well. Thanks for coming out. With that, we'll say goodbye.